Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andre and I'm your bookworm. And today we do not have a book review, but we still have book content. And that book content will just be talking about these beautiful books that all belong to the Discworld. So yeah, I know that the fans of Lord of the Mysteries are expecting me to have more chats about Lord of the Mysteries, which is a great web novel, but this is not the time. Don't worry, it's coming. There will be more content. I'm currently, just to update you, on chapters 650 past that. So getting close to the end of the third volume. And yeah, other content will come, but today we're talking about Discworld, which was written by Terry Pratchett. And what is the Discworld, you ask me, if you have never heard of this? Well, the Discworld is a universe kind of like Cosmere, Marvel Cinematic Universe, in the sense that it's a universe where several different series happen, sometimes at the same time, other times just overlapping in terms of characters or events. But the big characteristic of the Discworld is that the world is a disc, supported on top of 4 elephants, which on turn are all standing on top of a giant turtle that is swimming through space. That giant turtle is called Atuan. So just by hearing this, you can more or less tell what type of universe this will be, what type of story, how absurd, ridiculous, funny it will be. But since this is such a big world and there are so many books about it, we could just create so many videos talking about it. So what are we focusing on today? So today we're focusing mostly on the books that I have read and reviewed here on the channel, which are these around me. You can check all of them on the channel, either through thumbnails or cards up above. They all have their corresponding names, but as you can see, there are 9 of them, and the 9 are The Color of Magic, The Light Fantastic, Equal Rights, Mort, Sorcery, and then we go here with Weird Sisters, and then this one is Sorcery. No, this one is Pyramid, sorry. This one is Guards, which was the latest one I've read, and this one is Reaper Man, which was published after this one, and that's why it's this order. So this is kind of the chronological order so far. Not all of these books belong to the same sub-series. Some of them are part of the Unseen University, which is also called Rincewind sometimes. Others are the Death series, like these two. Then we have the Witches series, which are these two kind of. So there are several sub-series that I have sampled from, and that gives me a big range of Discworld books, I guess. Basically, each series follows a different set of characters, or at least a theme throughout the books. For example, we see a lot of Rincewind in these, we see a lot of Death in these, we see witches in the Witches series, which I mean is pretty obvious that we were going to see that, but just in case you were doubting. And Guards, for example, which is the City Watch, we follow a lot of characters that belong to the City Watch. But just so you have an idea, in the Discworld, there's a total of 41 books, so this means I haven't even read a quarter of them. And they span a long time between the first and the last one. The first one, for example, The Color of Magic, was published in 1983, whereas the last book published by Terry Pratchett in the Discworld was published in 2015. That's 32 years altogether, which means that at times he was publishing more than 1 book a year, since there are 41 of them, which is amazing of itself, but at the same time, this amount of time shows us that there must have been changes throughout time, just simply based on the author's experiences, on his skill at writing. I already detect by reading all of these books that the style of his writing in this first one is very, very different from the last one that I've read. In books, for example, like The Color of Magic and The Light Fantastic, I can tell that his writing is more kind of like absurdist, chaotic, and it picked on a lot of tropes of fantasy as well, which he still does in his most current ones. But that also means that these are not just funny books that you laugh, they actually have some commentary into them from the very first book up until the last ones, I'm guessing. At least from the 9 ones I read, there was always something going on. And as you progress through the books in the chronological order, which we'll get into that, but if you progress like this, you will notice how his writing stops being so chaotic, and I mean, it's still very absurdist, but it's absurd, a logical absurdism, if it makes sense. He makes a lot of logic in the universe instead of just being chaotic, like, for example, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I think it's a certain type of absurdism that is very chaotic, and this one, it becomes less chaotic, more logical, while still being very satirical as well. Of course, not every book is great. There is a big range of scores with these books as well. For example, on Goodreads, if we go by those, and comparing only the books that I have read, because I don't want to be influenced by seeing the scores of other books, but Sorcery is the book with the lowest score, just standing at 3.91 out of 5, and Guards is actually the highest so far with a 4.34 out of 5. Which is funny, because in my opinion, I don't consider Sorcery or Guards as the best or worst books of the 9 that I have read. If you've been here on the channel and have seen those videos, you know that for me, the worst one was The Color of Magic, the first one, which is 3.6 out of 5. And the best one for me was Equal Rights, which is this one here, which I gave a 5 out of 5. But I think that is just the beauty of it. It shows you that not every book will fit your mood and your style of reading, but because there are so many, surely there will be at least one that you will enjoy, and maybe a whole series that you will find really appealing. For example, even though Equal Rights was the book I gave the highest, I actually enjoyed the Death series more as a whole series. Which, let me get into it. Well, one of the advantages of having such an enormous world is that there's a lot of content of not only people reading and reviewing it, but also people helping out others to be introduced into this world. Because with so many books, where do you start? Which series, since there are so many? Should you go chronologically? Should you go by the sub-series? Should you go by entry points? Well, if you Google it, you will have a whole bunch of options. You'll have images with flowcharts showing you which sub-series to start, which ones are connected. It's a whole thing that I'm going to put some images in so you can see how chaotic it can be. And of course, there are also many videos on YouTube just telling you where should you start or which books not to read first, things like that. But I think, of course, this always depends on the person themselves, because not everyone will fit with the same entry point as another one. And I think that example applies to me, because I've actually considered having started this universe twice. My first entry into the Discworld was with Guards, and I started reading this book. It was gifted to me as a Secret Santa kind of gift, where it was a group of friends where everyone picks a name and you have to give a book to that person. So it was a bookish Secret Santa. It was really fun. I got Guards. And at the start, I was like, well, I've always wanted to read some Terry Pratchett. I've always wanted to read some Discworld, so why not start with this? And the person who gifted me this said that it was a good entry point into the Discworld. And if you've seen the review I made for this book, you know that the first time around, I didn't enjoy it that much. I finished it and I was like, yeah, okay, it was okay, but not the kind of thing that I really want to dive into, considering there are so many books and the return wasn't as high as I expected. And because of that, I kind of finished the book, put it on the shelf, and never thought about the Discworld again. Until I was listening to a podcast that does a lot of different content of fantasy and sci-fi, and they were talking about representation of death in fantasy worlds or science fiction worlds. And they mentioned how the death in the Death series of Terry Pratchett has always been a huge figure in literature, because a lot of people have read it, have related a lot, and people have even said thank you to Terry Pratchett when he was still alive for creating a character like that and for allowing them to think that death might be like that. And that kind of intrigued me. I was very curious how good it would be. And so I looked a bit first, figuring out if Mort, which is the first book of the Death series, was a good entry point into the Discworld. Once I figured out it was, I just decided to read it. And then I read Reaper Man as the second one, and I really, really enjoyed both books. And of course, by then, people started recommending me other books to read, especially because between the second and the third book of this series, there are certain events and certain characters that overlap, so they recommended me to read a bunch of others. And since I was like, okay, if I have to read all the others just to read this one, why don't I just start from the start and read from that point onwards? That way it gives me a chronological view of Terry Pratchett as he was publishing these books. And that's why I started then with The Color of Magic and went on like that. So technically, I have read 4 books that are considered entry points into the Discworld: Mort, Equal Rights, Guards, and The Color of Magic. Of course, not everyone considers all of these as entry points. For example, the Discworld Emporium, which is the IP for the Discworld, does not consider Guards as an entry point, nor The Color of Magic. They recommend Mort and Equal Rights and a couple of others, but these two, not really. But if you look at other images, you'll see that they might be considered. I mean, this one will always be an entry point if you read it by chronologically. But what is my opinion really on where you should start? Well, the first thing is definitely not The Color of Magic. I don't think it's a good representation of the Discworld or of Terry Pratchett's writing style, and I think if you read it, you might think the same thing I thought when I read Guards. It was okay, but it was not really something that you want to invest for 41 books. And whilst I think Guards is closer to that representation of what Terry Pratchett is, I still think that there were parts that wasn't as good as, for example, Mort and Equal Rights. Of these two, I would totally recommend you to read one of them, see if you enjoy them. I think Equal Rights has an amazing message that was done in a way that many people don't think about it like that, but I think was very, very good. And I mean, that's why I gave it a 5. And of course, I think both of those books have amazing casts of characters, and because some of them continue throughout the series, for example, Death, I think they represent good entry points into the Discworld and also good sub-series to start with, maybe finish and then jump into another one. Of course, like I said, if I had to choose one of the sub-series to start with, I would go with the Death sub-series, simply because I think the two of them together are better than Equal Rights and Weird Sisters together. Because I kind of think that from the first one to the second one, there was an increase, whereas for this Witcher series, there was a decrease. But then again, that is very subjective because this book, Weird Sisters, is a book where Terry Pratchett is making a lot of references to a Shakespeare piece. And I've never read Shakespeare, so those references were going all above my head. I was not getting them. I wasn't even realizing they were there until I read other reviews of people that have read both things. And so I thought it was funny. I really liked the characters, but the plot itself and the story was okay. And that's why I preferred the Dead series. But I mean, not that Weird Sisters is bad. I give it a 4.4 out of 5, so it's still good. And like I said, The Color of Magic was a particular case. It was the first one. It was differently written because I think most of these all have above a 4. And I mean, that's partially why I recommend you to read Discworld. I think they are amazing works of art. Not only the covers, because if you look, the covers look amazing. And these covers are the hard covers from the Discworld Emporium. So they have a special care. They all look quite different in colors and in the designs. They all are relevant to the story itself. But on top of that, I think these books are fun. Most of the times they will be able to bring a chuckle and a smile to your face. And like I mentioned with Equal Rights, some of these have amazing messages, amazing themes that Terry Pratchett explores and that make you think in a different way. And I think that's when a book really shines, is when you're reading it, you're enjoying it already, and the book is making you think of things in a different perspective. Then you're not only enjoying, but also learning, or at least expanding your horizons. So I think it's time for us to have a discussion in the comments. If you're a Terry Pratchett fan, comment down below what is your favorite book or sub-series, and tell us why you think so. But of course, without any spoilers. And if you haven't started the Discworld, but you are curious and you landed in this video, comment down below after this, what do you think will be the book you're going to start with? And let's just chat about it because it'll be fun and we can recommend books to each other, right? So if you're new also, don't forget, subscribe, like the content, and I shall be seeing you on Thursdays and Sundays, okay? See you soon.